Hey everybody, welcome to Broken Arrow. Today I will be playing as the Russians, and I'm just going to go over how I go about planning out my strategy and using recon as forward security to disrupt enemy momentum and use that time to bring in reinforcements. The goal of recon is speed and mobility, so I prioritize using Humvees, Jeeps, fast moving vehicles so that I can get my VDV and my Spetsnaz close to the objective but not too far past it, because the goal is to disrupt the enemy's momentum and spoil their movement while also setting up a perimeter so that you can determine where the enemy is attempting to attack you from. Um, so what you're going to see here is just really good thought out strategy and how to go about building momentum and finding gaps in the enemy's defense and flooding that gap with units, or maybe just sneaking in some VDV or Spetsnaz or any kind of special group that you may be using behind enemy lines to disrupt their reinforcements, which you will see later in the video. So I'm going to try my best to commentate on this while this is in the background. I wish there was a replay mode so I kind of take my time explaining these things. But ultimately, my goal is to set up a perimeter kind of beside the objective and use my recon units to slowly push out on probably three different axes to make contact with whatever the enemy player is doing in regards to their units. And when you set up a perimeter with your recon in such a fashion, it allows you to determine which axis along your front line that the enemy is coming from. And that way you can determine where you want to push your infantry, like if you're using mechanized infantry, which is the APCs and foot soldiers. You can kind of determine where you want to put your units. So you'll see over time how having that recon at the front kind of helps me buy time to bring in reinforcements to actually create a front line. And then I slowly start to push forward and find gaps in the enemy's line that I can successfully infiltrate with the VDV and disrupt their back line. I'll try to make sure that I don't leave too many uh, dull moments in this, and keep the commentary going. So, my goal here is to pretty much control this right side of the map, beside the objective, and allow my teammate to focus solely on the objective to my left while securing the right flank. So you're going to start to slowly see how I push my VDV out and create a, I wouldn't say a front line because it's not my front line per se. It's more so individual forward security post for each squad. And as I mentioned earlier, the goal of having the forward recon is to, one, determine where or which axis the enemy is going to attack from, get an understanding of how many units they're sending, which areas are they focusing on, and then that will allow you to determine where to pull your units. So the first thing you always want to do is use your recon and use speed. You know, I didn't send them out in APCs or tanks. I sent them out in Humvees and basically, I don't even know, a two-door Jeep from the looks of it. So recon and then man pads. You don't really want any slow AA. Like I said, you want everything to be fast. So just having two Iglas is more than enough to handle any kind of air that your opponent may throw at you. So just make sure that you keep them supplied, and you should be good to go. So now my forward security here with my recon is starting to spread out, and you're starting to get a look at the line that I'm forming here with these units. And the goal here is to push them out and support them with artillery, because what you want to do is not win these engagements if they do happen, but your goal is to pretty much spoil the enemy's attack, disrupt them, damage their units. You want to wreak as much havoc as you can on your opponent before they actually reach your front line. And by doing this, this allows you to build and take time to build your defenses. Look at the map. Where do I want to put my ATGMs? Where do I want to focus my infantry? And that's why it's really important to use speed to create a safety net for your reinforcements. So now that I have my recon out front, I can start to kind of look at the map and determine where do I want to put my TOW missiles, my ATGMs, where do I want to focus my movement. And I also want to see how far I can penetrate past the objective without meeting any kind of resistance. And what this does is now it allows you to determine where are the holes in the enemy's front line. Is there even an enemy front line? Is this player actually focusing on your side of the map? This is how you get a feel of how to move across the battlefield. And it all starts with your recon. So it's very important to have that recon, because as you're commanding these units, based on which squad takes a certain amount of damage, or depending on how many units they encounter, you can determine how to orient yourself. Now we've got, as you can see, my recon spotted an enemy stash, so now I can take that out with some rocket artillery. And as they progress more and more, you start to see more units, and the recon does what it's meant to do, recon and give you feedback on what they're seeing. So now I know there's some enemy mortars in this tree line back there, there's an enemy stash right there. And this is what you want to see. These are all good things, because the goal here is to disrupt your enemy, not only by destroying their armor, infantry, but their critical assets like ammo dumps, supplies, because without that, now the enemy has to wait for supplies to fill back up, bring it back to the front line, and that's really is what's going to hurt your opponent more than anything, is destroying their their resources and their artillery. And I will say, I love this game, especially someone coming from someone who's played Warno a lot. If this game just gets the tweaks in reference to its graphics, it's honestly it's sold to me, because I love the fact that artillery actually does damage in this game. Your man pads actually do damage to helicopters. It's not some random generator where six of your missiles are going to miss and one might hit. You actually feel a lot more powerful to me in this game versus in Warno. And then the modern setting helps a lot too. So I'm generally enjoying this game a lot. But that's besides the point. Now you can see that my recon spotted this rocket artillery, and I put them on hold fire because I want to wait till it gets close to really get more effect out of my unit, and make sure that I get some critical hits and accurate hits. And now that I know that there is some artillery there, I can use some cluster munitions on it and take that out, and that's going to hurt them a lot as well. Preventing the opponent from using artillery to soften up the objective and progress on it with whatever units they may have in the area. But as you can see, I'm slowly starting to kick out my recon a little bit more. I may stop them here and give myself time to build up my actual front line. As you can see, I'm starting to bring up some more mechanized infantry to kind of put in the back behind my recon units. And that's the purpose of having a recon so far forward, is now I know I have a safety net of behind my recon to where I can start to plan out my defense. Okay, I want to put a tow missile along this road here. Let me put some iglas here. Maybe I can put a T-80 in this tree line. But what it does is it gives you time to think and plan. And my recon is also reinforced by rocket artillery. And as you can see, the artillery takes some good damage. So if my recon units get pressed by overwhelming numbers, then I call in, my indirect fire with my rocket artillery, and I pull them back because I don't want them to engage in combat, one-on-one or against multiple units. That's not the purpose of the recon, and it's pretty effective. And as you can see, I spot another stash, and I'm going to hit that, and that'll be 2 stashes that I've taken out in the first 20 minutes or so, and that's going to hurt my opponent as well. No, it's pretty good. Took out the ammo dump and the MI8 that was trying to resupply from it. Another thing is you just want to make sure that after you send off a salvo with your artillery that you relocate it immediately. The counter battery in this game by players seems to be a lot more effective compared to in Warno. So if you don't keep an eye on your artillery units, they will get taken out very quickly. So now I've decided to send one of my recon units forward to kind of scout out the forest and see if there are any units in the forest, and if not, get ahead of the front line to kind of get an eye on the opponent's movement, enemy movement, and determine which axis they're putting a lot of pressure on. As I spot this, what was that, T-80, T-90? But so far, I can tell that I'm pretty comfortable penetrating further past the objective, as you can see, because of how far I'm able to go. So what this tells me is one thing for certain, the enemy or the opponent doesn't have a lot of units or presence on the right side of this map. So that gives me some options. I can either sit back and build my front line and kind of just, hold this position here, or I can start getting some more VDV units and make my way back into the enemy's back line and kind of wreak some havoc. And the way you want to typically go about that is, let me get this part first. So before I get to that point, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of setting up my front line with the infantry, and I'm pulling my BTRs back behind the units so that, if they do come in contact with a superior enemy force or they're sending in a lot more infantry, I can pull them back into the BTRs and get some cover for those units and kind of catch whoever may be overwhelming me by surprise. And now I see that my first recon unit penetrated pretty far into the enemy territory, and I see some artillery there. So instead of trying to send my units along a different route, I'm going to send them straight down the same line the first recon unit went through, because I know that there are no enemies in that particular area. And that's how you take advantage of a penetration into the enemy's lines, is you find one spot that you could kind of get through and you funnel units through that and then spread out once you get past it. So now I was able to spot another enemy stash, so I can get some rocket artillery on that and disrupt the opponent's ability to supply his artillery, which is probably there, and if anything, just be a hindrance to the opponent. Because once you've gotten some units behind the enemy, it kind of gives them something to think about. If this recon unit is here, maybe there's more, maybe there's not, and it's a good way to disrupt your opponent. So now, as you can see, I've spotted 2 ammo dumps at this point, and the opponent, or whichever, is starting to saturate the force with artillery. And this is a good thing, because now you've got the opponent wasting the artillery on one recon unit that they may or may not be hitting, instead of focusing on using that artillery on forward objectives. And this is how you spoil, or like I say, disrupt your opponent. You want to take their attention away from what's really important and make them focus on you or the havoc you're causing in the back. And as you can see, I get a nice ambush on this Jeep here. I think it was carrying some snipers, yeah. And this is what you want to do with your VDV Spetsnaz. You want to use them in angles and in a manner where they can ambush units and then get away. So I try to, when I use them, I try to avoid frontal attacks with these units, because you're going to hit a lot of armor. Armor is best in the front. So I try to put them on the flanks of roads so that they can get a good crossfire in. So if a tank is coming, like a heavily armored Abrams, you can hit it from the side. If it turns to face one unit, then the other unit gets a side shot or a back shot. So you really want to kind of think about how you have these units facing to get the best effect, because the best way to get rid of enemy armor is not by using your own tanks, but using ATGMs and well-placed infantry. So right now I'm just moving my recon more forward just so I can get eyes on earlier if my opponent tries to send some units down that road there. And I casually spot another supply dump, so I'm going to try and knock that out. I think that'll be about 5 of those that we've knocked out so far just from actively scouting. Um, but yeah, so as you can see, using recon is very effective when it comes to hitting your opponent where it hurts. So yeah, I think this will be about 5 or 6 of these that I've destroyed so far, or gotten destroyed. Um, so yeah, I was really happy with this game and how it was going, to be honest. I think I did a pretty good job of penetrating on the right and preventing my opponent access to that side road to get to the front, and really limiting them to that main road. Um, Unfortunately, all that effort did not help uh, due to our team, my teammate losing that left side. But it is what it is. But my goal here ultimately was to disrupt the enemy from the right and just kind of envelop them from the right and just make them focus elsewhere and try to slow them down as much as possible as far as getting to the objective and freeing up my teammate to, do whatever he needed to do um, to pretty much hold the objective. But it is what it is. Another thing to note is I did destroy that supply truck in the back, which I honestly think is just as important as destroying the ammo dumps, because once you knock all those out, your opponent can't has to. I'm pretty sure. I think there's a cooldown for it, but they pretty much have no vehicles to use to bring supplies to the front. Now I don't know how long the cooldown is for that, because I believe your units do come back after some time, but it is helpful to knock out those supply trucks like this one right here and prevent your opponent from having the assets necessary to bring up supplies. So all in all, just really putting a hole in my opponent's game plan, to killing their ammo dumps, killing their supply trucks, ambushing their units, just being a pain. And that's how you want to use your VDV in your recon. So I start to notice that my opponent, my teammate, really is losing on the objective. Um, it was kind of a surprise to me because of how much I'm disrupting this side of the map with killing the supplies and just being a hindrance. So I had to look at that side and determine how to best defend those two main roads. So I put some toes on that left side to get a crossfire on the enemy armor as it comes up that road. So a lot of the shots that these coordinates are going to get are going to be side shots at close range, which leads to some really nice one taps on the T80s and T90s. So positioning is really important with these units, and you'll find that if you take your time and consider the angles of how you want to approach these roadways and your opponent and the units that they're going to be sending your way, you can effectively kill 200 plus point units with a 50 point squad. So it works out really well, and you'll see as this goes on how the positioning of those toes in my squad units actually repels a couple of armored pushes. So like I said, it's not about having more armor and using armor on armor to destroy enemy units, because that's not really how battles are fought. It's more so personnel with, shoulder-mounted rockets and ATGMs. So now I recognize that I can start sending some Spetsnaz VDV back behind the enemy and kind of start hitting their reinforcements as they come in. Looking back at this replay, I should have recognized that my teammate was just not doing the best at holding the objective. Because really all he had to do was deal with armored pushes. So I was thinking about it, and I could have put some tow missiles along the eastern side of that road to kind of hit them from the flank as they come into the objective where my mouse was at earlier. Um, Looking back at it now, I wish I would have done that to kind of at least did do, I guess, a bit more damage before the opponent kind of got to my teammate. But here's a pretty good example of having that enfilade of fire with the Hornets on this main road, because the enemy tanks take a couple of hits and they reverse and push them back. But when they do come forward again, these Hornets make a pretty good mess of these T90s, and it was a pretty good sight to see. And that's kind of how you want to use your VDV. You know, took out that SAM, you know, took a little damage, smoked, and got out. And kind of want to keep these guys alive, and if possible, pull them back and heal them so that you can send them back out. I also brought up a T80 to kind of put on the flanks behind the toes to help multiply the damage output and protect this main road, just to give my teammate a bit more help while I focus on trying to push back behind on the right. Because if I can damage these tanks or inflict some kind of damage before they get to the front, you know, they're not going to be as eager to push these tanks out onto the objective if their health has pretty much been depleted by, you know, being ambushed, especially when their supply stashes are getting taken out like at the rate that they are. And that's just how you kind of want to hinder your opponent or spoil your opponent. You want to do as much damage as you can before they get to the front line, so that when they get there, they've pretty much been degraded and are easy pickings. And as you can see, that same unit, VDV unit at the front, pretty much almost wiped that T90 at point blank range, even though the health of that unit is relatively low. And that's a good victory. You know, you had a 5-man squad almost take out a T90. And I also put the T80 there to assist with any kind of side or flanking shots. So if that unit gets approached from the front, the T80 can get a nice clean shot on the side, and you know, you have 2 units sweeping up multiple units of enemy armor. And as you can see, now that T80 has to go all the way back to wherever the supply stash is, and I can guarantee you the reason that T80 has to go that far back to supply and repair is because I've been destroying those ammo dumps. So now they're putting them farther back. You know, so far we've managed to cut off the right side of the map and disrupt the enemy from coming through the flank and coming around the objective. You've destroyed like 5 or 6 ammo dumps and 2 supply trucks. So now the enemy has to bring those supplies even farther back from the front line, which means that any units that do get damaged have to go further back to repair, slowing down their time to get to the objective. And all of this starts to accumulate, and what it does, it just degrades your opponent. So now I know this right side has been pretty much been given up on by my opponent or opponents, and I can start using the VDV the way they're meant to be used and send them to behind the enemy line and just cause havoc, and just be an annoyance to my opponent. And what you're gonna see here in a sec is, well, this ambush on this grenade launcher unit, but the amount of damage the VDV inflicts on this T90 from getting a side shot at a clean side shot at close range, which I really do enjoy using infantry because it is they are a really powerful asset when you use them right. So let's see. So yeah, so putting them on the side of the road instead of on the front, and then you get a nice shot on the side here. Let's see. And it does a pretty good bit of damage. Yep. So now when that T90, and then now you have my Cornets coming in with the flank shots, and that's a dead tank. So it's really, like I said, positioning is everything. I had the VDV at the front of the road to get a side shot in, damages the tank, gets off 2 clean hits. T90 keeps coming in, and then I have the 3 ATGMs with the enfilade on the 2 and on the intersection of the main road that gives ample opportunity for multiple side shots while avoiding the front, and that's creating a funnel for that enemy armor. So even though they had superior numbers with those tanks, having those positions set up and the units in place, like those light units in place, pretty much destroyed that armored push with T90s, which are relatively good tanks and expensive tanks at that. So that's gonna hurt a lot. So now I'm getting my VDV in position here on the side road, and it's just a really awesome display of using the units how they're supposed to be used. And I guess you'll see in just a moment. Now my goal was to try and keep them alive. I really wish I would have capitalized on sending some supplies through the back too, so I could keep resupplying them and have this continuous disruption in the back. But you know, I'm still perfecting what strategy and doctrine that I have read over. But it's just lovely seeing these things work. And you can tell the opponent isn't paying attention to the units because they're just allowing them to show their side profile like this, and it's working out really well. There goes that supply truck, so no supplies for you. Just wreaking havoc on this back line here. Now the opponent looks like he finally noticed what's going on. It's like, it was too late by that point. So now you're starting to see that by, attacking in phases and using your recon, I'm disrupting my opponent with these units, and now he either has to stop and send these units back to his spawn to repair, or send them to a forward stash and hope that he can repair all these tanks. And this eases the pressure on my teammates as well, because now those units that were meant to come and hit the objective, now they're out of the fight before the fight even started. So this was a really beautiful play that I liked a lot. But yeah. But if you managed to stick around for a majority of this video, I appreciate it. It's hard to believe that we actually ended up losing this game, believe it or not. But you know, at the end of the day, it was a pretty fun game, and it was cool to see um, tactics actually work. Which I mean, it would. It's a strategy game, so if you employ uh, tactics that you read or know of, you would see some kind of results from it. But I'm still kind of refining how I employ what I read and seeing how it kind of plays out in the strategy world. And honestly, it works out very well. I would assume not many people read over battle doctrines and try and apply them to strategy games. I'm pretty sure a lot of people just kind of point and click. But when it is applied, man, it does work wonders, and it's really cool to see. But this is kind of just what I'm able to do so far, you know, after glancing over some things. I still need to refine how I, play and, judge the enemy's disposition, how I move units, and things of that nature. But, it's a pretty good start. But other than that, thanks for watching.